Okay, now we are on to file input output. So this video is going to show you how to do file input output basics. Just read from a file and output to the screen or output to a file. Okay, so this first one here is called file input output, just basics. All we need to do is read from the file. So the input is data from a file called data.txt, and the output is a list of names and salary. So if you look here on the left-hand side, I've added another file called data.txt. You can add a file here in Replit, or you can do the same in Visual Studio. If you're working in Visual Studio, you can go here and you can create a file under resource files. You can say add, and you can say I want to create a new item. And what you want to do is you want to go under utility and you want to create a text file. Okay, this will make sure, and give it a name. This will make sure it puts it in the same folder as your CPP file or your project folder. It is very important, otherwise your program will not find your file. So make sure you put it in the same folder as your CPP file. So it's a good idea to create it from here. The file doesn't have to be created from here. You can download a text file and you can put it on your folder in your folder, but make sure you put it in the right folder where your CPP file is. So if you go here, you can right click in Visual Studio, you can right click and say somewhere here, open containing folder. Okay, maybe not there. How about here on this tab? If you open containing folder, opens the folder where I have all my code file. And if you notice, I have my text file here as well, the data.txt. This is a different one, but the text files all go in the same folder as your CPPs, okay? So back to Replit, I have my data file, and this is what the data file has. It has a name, it has a salary, which is just an integer, and it has percentage raise. So this is all percentages, okay? So we're going to take this data and we're going to read from this file, and what I want to do is I want to take this percentage raise and essentially add, this is the base pay, this is the raise. I want to get the total salary with the raise, right? That's my goal. So we're going to read the lines of data. So if you come here, the way to read from a file is to include fstream, not iostream. iostream is input output stream. We need fstream to read from a file, which is called a file stream. That's the first step. Then you come here, and I also need string, of course, because I have a string in my data.txt file. I have names, so one string. And you need to declare a file stream variable. Unlike iostream that has cin and cout, file stream doesn't have variables. You need to create them. So ifstream says create an input file stream. So this is the name of my variable. This could be anything. You call it in data, I call it in file or in data, something like that, that says it's going to read in the data. And this is our data type, ifstream. Okay. So then I go to my text file. I need 3 variables, one for name, one for base pay, and one for the raise, and one for the final total salary, right? So I declare string name, I have double salary, I have that as a double, which is fine. I have a raise, which is a double, and I have total pay, all declared as a double. And it's good to initialize all of them. Then I open the file, in file.open data.txt inside of double quotes, because that's the name of the text file. And I set precision, and I set some manipulators so I can output my pay after that. Then I check. I'm not going to go in here and count the number of lines. That's not what I should be doing, because I could have multiple lines, like thousands of lines, right? So we check while not end of file, while not in file, which is the name of my variable, dot end of file. That's what EOF says. And it's a function that takes no parameters. So empty parenthesis. So this checks to see if we have reached end of file. That's what that does. And as long as it's not end of file, I want to come in here. And notice my data is all separated by space. So I can just use extraction operator. In file, extraction operator, not cin, in file, because we are reading from file. The first column is name. The second column is salary. The third is the raise. It has to go according to that. So name, we read the first data into name, second into salary, third into raise. Okay. Then I'm going to calculate the total pay right away, because I'm not storing any of this data in arrays or anything like that, right? So as soon as I read, I calculate the total pay, and I output it to the user as name, separated by a semicolon, and the total pay. Then the loop goes back, goes to the next line of data. So as soon as we are done with the first line and the calculation is done, output is done, cursor moves to the next line. So it just goes like this. It reads, 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 cursor sits there, goes to the next line, and so on and so forth until there's no more data left. And so the while loop takes care of going through line by line. For every line, it does these three things. Reads, calculates, outputs. Goes to the next line, reads, calculates, outputs. Okay. And so the data has to exactly match what you're trying to read here. If one line here has some bad data, like if there are any characters here after this, then we'll run into trouble. Okay. So that's the key to reading from a file. Then we close the file and we are done. So if you run this, you will see that it will print the name and the final salary after the raise. Okay. So that's that. Now let's take a look at another file. The same thing with output file. So I go to my ripples and here I have this folder and I go in there and file input output output file. How do you write to an output file? The same thing. Instead of outputting it to the screen, I'm going to output it to an output file. Okay, same data. Same data. This text file doesn't exist. I ran it a few times, so it exists now, but it's not going to exist. So here we go, and we do the same things that we had before. We need to declare fstream, but now I also have ofstream out file because I want a variable to be able to write to a different file. I don't want to overwrite this file because that's my input data. So I want to write to a different file. Okay, so I create now ofstream. Same variables, nothing different. I open the file. In this one, I'm going to do a test. How do I know my file actually opened? So if file opens and everything is good, in file will return true. If file does not open, in file will return false. So I check to see if not in file. That means if in file return false, not in file will be true, and we'll go into this if statement. And we'll say file did not open, I'm done. Same thing with the out file. I open out file and I give it a name. You can call this whatever you want. I called it output.txt. If not out file, then again, we're going to quit. If we cannot read or write to a file, then we quit. Okay. Then instead of doing cout for the fixed and show point and all the manipulators, I do out file. That's the only difference. Instead of cout, you do out file, which is your output file variable. That has been associated with this file, text file. Then we go through and do the same thing, while not in file, that end of file. All of that is the same. Instead of outputting to the screen, I'm going to output it to the file. It's the only difference. And then I close both of these, both my files. So very similar, not much of a difference other than the fact that we are writing to the out file instead of to cout. So there's no output here because it wrote to my output file. And here's the data. So to test, you can go here and let's say copy a couple of extra lines from the front and put it at the end of data to see if it actually does it, right? So same thing, let's give them a better raise of 7.8. So that pay should be higher. So run it again, and then you will see now that the output text should have those extra lines. See that? And so this pay is a little better than this pay because their raise was a little bit more. So that's how you write to an output file. I'm going to show you one more in this video. How do you now do that with functions? Since we know all of that stuff, right? We know functions, we know how to read from file. Let's put the two together. File input output with functions. Again, the same data, same text file. But now I have functions. So I have a function to open file. I have a function to open an output file and an input file. And I have a function to read the data and do something with it. Okay. So in this case, I'm just reading the data. I'm really not doing anything with the data. I think I'm reading the data and I am outputting it. I'm doing everything that we did there. Okay, so it's the same thing. So create your two stream variables. And in this case, since we've already done arrays, you know what's a C string, a char array, right? I'm going to read the name of the file from the user. So I declare a char array to read the file name from the user. Max char is my constant for the number of characters in the char array. I tell them enter the file name, and they enter it. And this is how you read a file name with spaces or any string with spaces, right? Scene.getLine. So I read it into the variable called file name. then my function takes this file stream variable and the name of the file and tries to open the file. Okay, now notice my file stream variable is passed by reference. The special thing about a file stream variable is it has to be passed by reference. It cannot be passed by value. Okay, so we pass the file stream variable by reference. And open file comes here and does the same thing that we did in main. Tries to open the file. If it does not, then it outputs a message and it exits, meaning it quits the program. Okay, now the same thing with my output file. One thing you notice my function name is the same. This is called an overloaded function. The same name, but I wanted to take in file one time and out file one time because it's the same thing, right? They're both checking to do the same thing. So an overloaded function is a function that must have different parameters. These parameters, the types should be different or the number should be different. In this case, the types are different. One takes the input file, one takes the output file. They do the same thing with their respective parameters. Okay, so ask the user to enter the file name, read the file name, call open file, send in file and file name, and then copy the file name, string copy into file name. Okay, because now it's the output file. Again, I don't need multiple variables, right? Once this file name has been used and the file has been opened, I can use the same variable. I take the output text file name and I copy it into file name, string copy because it's a char array, can't use the assignment operator. Then I open file, call out file and file name, send those two to that. Now, for an overloaded function, it knows if I send in file, it goes to this function. If I send out file, it goes to this function. So it knows how to do that based on the parameters. Okay. Then we call the read data function. And again, I pass read data. I pass both in file and out file. And read data takes in file and out file by reference. File stream variables have to be passed always by reference. You don't have a choice. Okay. So we declare all these variables. Remember, the data is the same thing from this text file, no difference. So I have salary, raise, and total pay. I have name as a char array because you've learned char arrays by now. So I have name as a char array. I do the fixed and show point and set precision and all that to both streams, the console and to the output file stream. Then I go through the loop. It's the same thing. The loop is the same. Nothing has changed there. I output both to the screen and to the file. And I close both files. Okay, so the thing to take away from here, and it'll work exactly the same way, no difference, but you will see an output on the screen here. So let me type in the name of the text file, data.txt, and it outputs on the screen and outputs to the file as well, because I told it to do both. So a couple of things to take away from here is that file stream variables are always passed by reference. Char arrays, you must use functions like string copy, can't use assignment operators, right? And overloaded function. Okay, so those are your lessons from this program.